All right, let's get into it. Today, we're basically going to be detectives. But instead of solving a crime, we're solving an economic mystery. A really weird one about a trend that just reversed itself.
You know, when you get right down to it, economists are kind of like detectives. They're constantly sifting through all this data, looking for clues, trying to figure out why we as people do the things we do. Every single number tells a story, and sometimes it's a full-blown detective story.
And seriously, the economy is just packed with these fascinating puzzles. Like, think about this. Why is it that when the economy takes a nosedive, more people decide to go back to college? Or why does it feel like the price of a TV keeps dropping, but your hospital bill just keeps going up and up? These are exactly the kinds of mysteries that economic detectives get to investigate. So today, we're going to open up a very specific case file. This one is about a huge, sudden shift in how millions of Americans behaved. It's a real head-scratcher that started not too long ago.
Okay, here it is. This is the heart of our mystery. For decades, Americans were driving more and more every single year. It was a predictable trend. And then, around 2008, they just stopped. They hit the brakes hard, and the big question is, why?
And this chart right here, this is our Exhibit A. This is the smoking gun. You can see it clear as day, that steady climb for years and years, and then, boom, a sharp downturn. The trend just completely reverses. So, like any good detective, the first thing we have to do is line up our suspects.
And in this case, we've got a prime suspect right away. The one that everyone thinks of immediately, the price of gas. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? Gas gets crazy expensive, so people are going to drive less to save a buck. Case closed?
Well, when you put the evidence side by side, it really does look like an open and shut case. On the left, you've got miles driven going down. On the right, gas prices are just soaring. They almost look like perfect mirror images of each other. Seems pretty straightforward. And this is our main hypothesis. It's a totally reasonable place to start. When gas prices shot through the roof, it gave people a massive incentive to maybe carpool or take the bus or just stay home more often. It's a plausible theory. Ah, but here's the plot twist. Because in any good mystery, and especially in economics, the obvious answer isn't always the whole story. We gotta dig a little deeper. We have to really interrogate our prime suspect here.
And when we do, we start to see some holes in the story. For one thing, look at the timing. Driving started to fall a few years after gas prices began that really steep climb. It's not a perfect match. And that brings up the big question. What else was going on? What other massive event was happening right around 2008? Well, only the Great Recession. Kind of hard to ignore that, right? It seems our prime suspect might have had an accomplice.
And this leads us to what is maybe the single most important rule in the entire Economic Detective's Handbook. You've probably heard this phrase before, but really, truly getting it is the key to solving pretty much any economic puzzle. Okay, first up is correlation. All correlation means is that two things are happening around the same time. They're moving together. You know, every morning the sun rises and a rooster crows. Those two things are correlated. In our case, gas prices went up and driving went down. Correlated. Now, causation is so much stronger. It means that one thing actually makes the other thing happen. When you flip a light switch, it causes the light to turn on. But the rooster crowing definitely does not cause the sun to rise. See the difference? It's a big one. So let's put it side by side. Correlation is just noticing that two things are moving together. Causation is figuring out that one thing is making the other happen. Our entire job as detectives is to figure out if the link between gas prices and driving is just a coincidence, a correlation, or if it's actual causation. And to do that, we need some special tools. So let's open up the Economist toolkit. How do they actually go from just looking at a chart to doing a real investigation? Well, there are two really important tools they use all the time. The first tool is something called an economic model. Now, I know that sounds complicated, but don't let the name fool you. A model is really just a simplified version of the world. I mean, the real world is messy and incredibly complex, right? A model helps us strip away all the noise and just focus on the few things that really matter for our investigation. Its simplicity is actually its biggest strength. And a model can be a lot of different things. It's not always some scary equation. As you can see here, a model can just be a simple explanation using words, or it could be a table of numbers, a graph, like the ones we've already been looking at, or yeah, it can be an algebraic formula. They're all just different ways of describing the same relationship.
But here's the thing. For any of these models to actually be useful, economists have to agree to follow one very, very important ground rule. It's the foundation of the whole thing.
And that rule is called ceteris paribus. It's a Latin phrase, but all it means is all other things being equal. Basically, it's how economists create a controlled experiment when they can't do one in the real world. To really figure out if high gas prices cause less driving, we have to use this idea to isolate that one single factor. We have to pretend, just for a second, that a giant recession wasn't also happening. Ceteris paribus lets us ask, okay, what is the effect of just the gas prices, and nothing else?
All right, so let's put all the pieces together. We've got our mystery, we've got our suspect, and now we have the tools to do a proper investigation. This whole process, this is what it really means to think like an economist.
So here it is, the economic detective's method laid out in 5 steps. You start with a puzzle you see in the data, like people driving less. You come up with a hypothesis, maybe it's gas prices. You build a simple model to check out that relationship. You then use ceteris paribus to try and isolate that one variable. And finally, you make a careful call on whether what you're seeing is just a correlation or if you found true causation.
And this is the real takeaway here. Using this process, we can go back to our case. Was it just high gas prices, or was it the recession that tanked people's incomes? The truth, of course, is that it's a mix of both. High gas prices were a suspect, for sure, but the recession was a very powerful accomplice. The goal isn't to find a single simple answer. The goal is to have a trustworthy process for thinking through any complex question about the world.
So there you have it. You now have the basic toolkit of an economic detective. You know how to spot the clues, how to question the suspects, and, most importantly, how to tell the difference between a coincidence and a real cause. The world is full of these kinds of puzzles. So, what mystery would you solve first?